Hey, Gary, it's always great to talk to you. Just a great time to be here. And I know that what we're going to talk about today is something that's kind of near and dear to your heart, a bit of a passion project, so to speak, on inside of cybersecurity for you. So let me set it up a little bit with a few things here. And
Yeah.
we're always looking at risks and threats and how to mitigate those, how to secure things within a sphere for an organization. And generally speaking, we think of that as kind of a terrestrial thing here on Earth and what's going on. But in all reality, a lot of this is happening in space. We talk about cyberspace, but in actual space with satellites and things like that. And this is something we see a lot of in movies, in TV, in real life. I mean, we've created the Space Force under the Department of Defense that's been birthed out of the Air Force and all of this. So it's
Yeah.
really something that's very timely today, that's really going on. So it should be a really fun topic for us to talk about. And just looking forward to getting your thoughts on things. And I guess I'll just jump right in with the questions. And the first one is, could the next war that we see on Earth here begin actually outside of Earth? Could it begin in cyberspace?
Great question, Nathan, and thank you very much. And it's kind of interesting subject. I wrote a white paper, over 10 years ago, I think 2011, 2010 timeframe, specifically talking about the battle for cyberspace supremacy. It's a really interesting topic for me personally. I've always felt that the satellite infrastructure is vulnerable to attack, and so when I put this paper together, many years ago, it was with, of course, that in mind. I do believe that our satellite infrastructure is very much at risk, and so I would say, yes, right. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of speculation around this subject, especially in recent weeks, about the possibility of taking out a satellite infrastructure, and would that be considered a national threat? And the answer is real. I really believe that the prospect of a war beginning in cyberspace is real, and therefore it is a concern amongst our government as well as our industry leaders for sure, as a cyberspace warfare could potentially take out our critical infrastructure assets. And of course, as you know, satellites are used for national security and safety, as well as for our communication infrastructure. And a couple of examples here on why this is such a sensitive area is we use satellites for communications to provide essential services across many industries and markets, such as financial, telecommunications, agricultural, media, broadcasting industries, and so forth, just to name a few. And as we all know, right, we now operate in a global economy whereby any disruption to the trading or the distribution of financial information could significantly impact the global economy.
Sure.
Within telecommunications, right, satellites are used to provide services for also telephone services, television broadcasting, and of course internet access. So again, any disruption to that communication flow would also have a significant impact. And people get scared, when normal activities disappear, such as the internet, telephone services, right, are in flux. So it's a huge concern. A world without, being online for a day would probably create panic. And in my opinion, and panic is something we certainly want to avoid. So Nathan, in my opinion, I think the bottom line is our economies are digitally interconnected now, and we rely heavily on these terrestrial systems and satellite networks to perform real-time information and business operations. So if I was to hedge my bets, I would say that any deliberate disruption to our satellite infrastructure could lead to war. So as a CEO in the wireless IoT security field, understanding these dynamics is crucial. And satellites, to me, are just another IoT device. They just so happen to operate over a weird protocol, running over a weird non-standard frequencies. So innovation in satellite cybersecurity plays a pivotal role in any mind. as a critical infrastructure depends on it. So preventing and mitigating the impact of a cyber warfare in space is very important. So again, just kind of wrapping up here, using cybersecurity enhancements like self-protection, DDR, and I'll talk about that later, data detection and response for satellite anomaly detection, for behavior analysis is vital going forward for protecting this particular infrastructure.
What would a cyberspace war actually look like, Garry?
I think a cyberspace war would be a digital war for sure, involving various cyber activities aimed at damaging, disrupting, or gaining control of our information systems and networks. Right? I think the number one attack would be hacking and sabotage. This is where attackers, Nathan, would try to leverage, protocol abuse or protocol abuse of the SATCOM protocols or applications that are in use to break into secure networks or steal, alter, or destroy data, and ultimately cause some sort of function failure. However, there are other attacks that could be exploited. Another one that comes to mind is denial of service attacks. This is where attackers could deploy a botnet, a network of systems basically designed to remotely generate a flood of traffic which overwhelms the infrastructure. So that's pretty problematic. I mentioned protocol abuse. This is where the SATCOM protocols and applications in use are exploited to deliver malicious packets and payloads that cause widespread disruption to other connected systems. So that's a problem. And of course, you also have malware infiltration types of attacks. This is where attackers could target a ground satellite station or the satellite itself by exploiting a weakness in the communication software used by attackers to inject malware into the system, which then would kind of propagate and execute the code across targeted satellite networks. Right? We don't want that either. This malware, if targeted, could be designed to disrupt satellite operations and lock out legitimate users from accessing critical systems, or even take control of the satellites themselves for nefarious purposes, Nathan, which would be a huge problem for us. So, I think there's quite an extensive attack surface. If any of these attacks, Nathan, were targeted against our cyber physical systems, for example, the interfaces used between our IT systems and industrial control systems and operational technology networks, these attacks could significantly impact our ability to provide essential services like water and power that we rely on today. So again, I believe a new approach is required, and this new approach is what we call self-protection, autonomic computing, i.e. take the human out the loop, DDR, anomaly behavior analysis, basically, and this provides the ability to validate the satellite data at the source. Basically, it's a measurement of what should be against what is. So it's expected legitimate traffic versus what is actually coming across or traversing that satellite network in real time.
What would be the prime type of targets in a cyberspace war?
The prime targets have got to be, critical infrastructure for sure, right? Including our government networks, our financial institutions, our healthcare system and providers. I think technology companies are a target. I think the energy providers are targets, our media outlets, and of course our telecommunication infrastructure providers themselves are targets. In going after critical infrastructure, for example, like the power grids, like the water systems, like the transportation systems and so forth, like our telecommunication, telecom networks, right? If you think about it, right, these are all essential services for normal daily activities. And any disruption to any of these services would potentially be life-threatening in many situations. So it's very important to keep them protected. I think going after our government networks and systems would be very problematic for us as well, right? As this would affect our national security and possibly our military communications. Right? Can't have that. I think as I mentioned, financial institutions, going after the financial guys like our banks, our stock exchange, or any of our financial systems. They're all interconnected these days, whereby one system impacts the other when it comes to decision making. I think going after our communication networks, such as our ISP providers, would have a significant impact, potentially creating panic. Right? Think about it: no internet, no TV, help! State of panic. So going after the communication networks is a huge problem. So we don't want that. And I think finally, wrapping up, I think targeting our healthcare systems would be devastating. Right? If you think about it, right, our hospitals, our labs, our care services rely on wireless RF communications to communicate, and I think any disruption would potentially to loss of life, and certainly don't want that either. So these are just some of the few prime targets that I think would be significantly impacted by a satellite outage, in my humble opinion.
How long would you expect a cyberspace war to last?
Cyberspace war, could last from a few days to a few weeks to even a few years. In the case of a concentrated attack, which is part of an ongoing low-level reconnaissance cyber espionage attack, detection may go unnoticed for a long time. And we call it a low and slow kind of probe of assets, to do discovery and so forth, and figure out escalation of privilege and whatnot. Again, depending on the impact of the attack, will depend on how long it could last. And I think that's why we need to move towards an AI, ML, self-protection, DDR kind of capability, data detection and response capability, whereby we're taking the human out of the loop to quickly and rapidly detect anomalies in our data communication stream. So again, I think as a cybersecurity CEO, to respond to the evolving satellite cybersecurity threat landscape, I would recommend a shift from just relying on old legacy tools to trying this new self-protection DDR capabilities to detect these attacks more in real time to prevent it from happening in the first place.
This is something that's near and dear to my heart as a veteran of the U.S. military. Like, would a cyberspace war be likely to lead to a conventional war?
Yeah, it's page. I'm looking for it here. It's on page.
Yeah.
It's funny because I answered that question, 10 years ago. In my opinion, while a cyberspace war could potentially escalate into a conventional warfare, it would definitely heavily depend on the severity of the impact, Nathan. And that's really all I can say on that, right? It depends on the impact. If they're going after our government, military networks, of course, it's going to escalate much, much quicker than if it was just going after, some other type of GPS, global positioning type of network. So
Sure.
that's my take on that.
In all of this, it can be a little scary to think about, but what can be done to prevent a cyberspace war today?
As someone who is at the forefront of wireless RF security, and of course, the reason why we're talking today is, right, satellites use RF frequencies to communicate. So it's all part of the same ecosystem here. RF wireless makes them vulnerable, right? I would focus on secure design, providing regular vulnerability assessments. I would recommend the implementation of self-protection DDR mechanisms, as well as use the latest security protocols to reduce this kind of new external attack surface of satellites and wireless in general. And I think by taking these steps, it will significantly contribute in a positive way to the broader effort to prevent a cyberspace war, i.e. there's no hanging fruit to go after. If there's no hanging fruit to go after, right, there's less likely an attempt or a pot shot, as they say. So again, as an innovator in cybersecurity, my role would also involve advocating for better, newer industry-wide standards and best practices across all wireless, RF, IoT, satellite devices that are using wireless to protect these networks and infrastructure. So as well as the use of the self-protection DDR, right, the ability to validate the data in transactional data is key. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, right, this DDR stands for data detection and response. It's a new self-protection capability whereby you can measure normal data traffic from abnormal traffic. And it's using AI and ML to do that very, very quickly. So protecting the data is the new gold, as they say. So this DDR validates the data originating from the source itself, Nathan. And it will help proactively identify things like protocol abuse or exposure states or unacceptable vulnerability conditions, hopefully before an incident or loss occurs. So in summary, DDR self-protection provides this continuous data threat modeling based on behavior analysis for the SATCOM protocols and frequencies being used, regardless of whether the emissions from the satellites are intended or unintended. So DDR plays a key role going forward. And of course, you can learn a lot more about NetShield and DDR and our AI capabilities at the loch.io website, LOCH.io website.
So you're the expert in this area, and this is a really big, important area for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add regarding satellite security and all that we've been talking about?
I think, the world is definitely changing, whereby everything seems to connect to something or someone these days. And I think in order to detect, assess, and prevent risk from these new forms of wireless RF and IoT, attacks and hacks and communications, right? A lot of these IoT devices are using new operating systems, new protocols, new frequencies, as I've kind of mentioned. The need for a software-defined radio inside a product like an AirShield that's shazamming the airspace is really key. And I think what you need is a software-defined radio at the edge that understands this new threat landscape, to be honest with you. And the problem that most organizations have today is that they understand about 4 operating systems, Nathan: Windows, Linux, iOS, and Android. And anything beyond that is just simply foreign to them. So having a software-defined radio at the edge that understands the new frequencies, understands the new protocols, understands the new operating systems, and so forth, allows them to be far more effective. So the net effect here is that wireless RF and IoT has introduced a broad range of new threats. And of course, IoT can be used to backdoor the wired side of the network. That's why it's important here. And of course, it's used to exfiltrate data to the cloud. So as wireless devices, such as cellular or CBRS or broad spectrum IoT, GPS, satellite communications, right? They all typically bypass traditional security controls. So by leveraging in this case, the AirShield software-defined radio for next generation wireless RF cybersecurity, especially across a hyper-connected environment, such as cellular, IoT, satellites, GPS, the list goes on, right? Software-defined radios can offer an effective approach to better threat detection and mitigation, and therefore, should be part of a cybersecurity strategy going forward, in my humble opinion. And very few companies have software-defined radios at the edge to be able to shazam that airspace and figure out what really is going on. So there's many, many, many benefits of software-defined radios. They're tenfold. And it comes to the top of mind really is the software-defined radios allow you to have broader RF spectrum monitoring and analysis, right? Software-defined radios, Nathan, can be used to monitor many frequencies, not just the 4 typical Windows, Android, and so forth that used for the hundreds, if not thousands, of frequencies and operating systems that are now being used by IoT. So this capability is crucial for monitoring the spectrum used by IoT and, of course, satellites, and by identifying any unauthorized or abnormal data transmission. In order to have an adaptive threat response, software-defined radios allow for the flexibility and the detection of protocol abuse, abnormal behavior, of data patterns, of wireless RF attacks across the non-standard protocols and frequencies. And what I'm saying is it's a must-have for today's online world. You've got to have software-defined radios at the edge to really understand that threat landscape. So at LOCH, we have this integrated SDR within our, kind of AirShield AI platform for enhanced threat detection and response. This AI, threat analysis that we do can handle complex communication patterns across many radio frequency signals and may be indicative of stopping any malicious activity. And that's why it's important to have the software-defined radio at the edge to help improve the overall security posture of your company. So at LOCH, our AirShield software-defined radio is also customizable, so it can be fine-tuned for your specific security, wireless security, GPS security, satellite security needs.
Sure.
And of course, that's what we're doing for other clients as they're using advanced satellite and IoT communications. And that's what the AirShield does. So Nathan, that's my take on cyber in space. Over to you.
Great stuff. Well, Garry, as always, thanks so much. And it's been great talking with you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.